and welcome to the 14th edition of Forbes India Leadership Awards. It's a very special discussion that we have lined up for you today with some of the members of the jury panel. It's my honor to introduce Harsh Mariwala, the chair of the jury, KVS Manian of Federal Bank, and Amit Chandra of Bain Capital. Thank you so much for taking out time today evening for this discussion, largely to understand what were the parameters that we focused upon when we were discussing the winners. Of course, we can't let out the name of the winners yet, but I can tell you that it's a very strong list that we have, and we'll reveal the names closer to the Forbes India Leadership Awards on the 28th of Feb. Let me start by coming to you, Mr. Mariwala. You focus a lot on corporate governance. You talk about how important it is to have governance as a foundation for a good organization. When you think about the changing dynamics of leadership in today's day and age, where there's so much of focus on innovation, on technology, tell me a bit about some parameters that you focused upon when you were deciding the winners across the 10 categories of Forbes India Leadership Awards.
It's like a hygiene factor, governance. If
Sure.
you don't have good governance, then automatically you are eliminated from the list. So clearly, I think as members of jury, we saw that whichever entry made the cut had high standards of governance. And anybody who had taken some shortcuts or was vulnerable to governance issues, they were eliminated straight away. So it's almost like a hygiene factor, and we eliminated some of the companies which had those perceptions about bad governance. Having said that, what were we looking for winners? We had different categories. So depending on the categories, we would give a little bit more focus on that particular category. It could be Entrepreneur of the Year, it could be Best Corporate Leader. But one clear thing which came out to me at least was that leaders don't give up, and they have grit. They have setbacks, but they know how to bounce back. So good leaders are self-motivated. They have this grit, which is a combination of passion combined with determination, perseverance. So we are looking at grit. And then while building the business, of course, it is highly competitive. You will face competition. How do you continuously innovate?
Yes.
To be 2 steps ahead of competition is a very, very crucial aspect of any corporate leader. So do you create a culture of innovation? Do you create a strong right to win? And finally, I think in terms of talent, you have excellent quality talent, because there is so much you can do as a leader, but ultimately you have to be supported by very good talent, not only reporting to you, but down the line.
Tell me a bit about the Gen Next entrepreneur category. You as a leader did the very unconventional move of actually incorporating professional leadership at Marico and not necessarily handing it down the family line.
Yes.
Tell me a bit about what were you looking for in this particular category when you were deciding upon the next generation to take forward the family legacy?
I think next generation, we had different options. There were some leaders who had been a part of a family managed organization. What individual role did they play in creating that delta in terms of their impact on the business was very, very crucial. It's very easy to say that, okay, I have inherited something which has been set up by my father or my uncle or somebody in the family. But the key thing is, after assuming charge, have I made a big impact on the organization? What has been my individual contribution? I think that was one critical factor while evaluating next gen leadership.
Mr. Manian, coming to you now at Federal Bank, of course, you have a ringside view of what's happening in India Inc. You have a very good idea of how retail loans are panning out. Tell me a bit about how do you look at all of this when you were looking at some of the key categories like CEO of the Year, for instance. What insights were you particularly looking to draw upon when you were examining the entries in this category?
In general, I would say some of the factors that at least I had a bias for are, I would say, the audacity of the idea, in the sense, audacity of the thought process or an idea. If it was a startup, it was an idea. If it was a CEO, it was the thought process of the strategy. How audacious was it? Again, that is very critical, because you can have great ideas, but good execution always is very important. So good execution was another important criteria. And in some cases, I also kept in mind the scalability of that idea, or scalability of execution is very important. And in some of those, scalability included the ability to go beyond domestic markets, go global. Broadly, I would say these were 3-4 things that were in my mind when I was looking at the evaluating the candidates.
Tell us a bit about the CEO of the year you spoke about. What about the entrepreneur of the year? Because when you talk about audacity of the idea, I think this was one category where this was strongly displayed.
Yes.
Tell me a bit about this and also about the various startup categories that we had, that is the promising startup and the outstanding startup.
Both these, whether it was the entrepreneur of the year or the startups, the whole thing begins with the audacity of the idea. So I would say in the two categories you mentioned, entrepreneur as well as startup, that was very critical. So I think these in both these categories specifically, and I would add in some of these areas, governance, where you started the discussion, becomes very critical, because many of these entrepreneurs, it's good to be audacious, it is good to be nimble, but as you grow, unless you build strong governance, sustainability can come into question.
Mr. Chandra, leadership, you say, is a lot about giving. It's a lot about nation building. It's not just about aligning selfish goals with corporate needs. Tell me a bit about what you thought about the categories such as grassroots philanthropist. We had very interesting nominations in this category. Do share your thoughts about what made the winners stand out.
Yeah, Neha, I think those categories have, if you see the nominations, have evolved a lot over the last 5 years. And I think in some ways the pace of change is even more rapid than the changes we are seeing in the corporate world. And that's basically because how people are giving back in India is actually changing very rapidly. First of all, we are seeing younger people give back, both more aggressively in terms of their money as a percentage of their income. Secondly, we are seeing them give back a lot more of their time in terms of their engagement, because this country is filled with incredibly talented people. And if they start applying their minds to the problems that we face as a society, then I think we can see dramatic change. And the third and most important facet is that for a long time, while many Indians in corporate houses we gave to direct change, i.e. we built a school, we built a hospital, we had a foundation that did some direct work. But now what we are beginning to see the new generation of givers do is they're actually thinking of systemic change and how to work with governments to actually change the lives of millions, and in some cases tens of millions of people through their theory of change. And what you will see in the categories is the change makers actually bring all of this alive.
In fact, at Forbes India Leadership, we have a very interesting category, which is Institution Builder, where we focus on heroes who help the nation go forward. Tell us your thoughts.
Yeah, it's about, the spirit of excellence in what you want to achieve. It's about perseverance, because, you want to achieve everything you want to achieve despite all the ups and downs, more downs than ups, and be at it. And it's about actually trying to do that across a breadth of really important cause areas. And the awardee that you will see has really tried to do that, which has built both institutions and movements that touch the lives of people across strata and across India.
Tell us a bit about what does new age disruption mean to you?
I think it's a very complicated issue, right? While it is an opportunity at one end, it's also the huge risk. So I think the best people who leverage technology need to know both the ends of the spectrum well, need to know to manage both the ends of the spectrum well.
Turnaround Star, the category that we have at Forbes India Leadership Awards, had companies that have categorically done this and more. What were some exceptional items in this category that stood out for you?
Yeah, again, oddly, it was a company that I'm very familiar with for a variety of reasons. It's a company I greatly admire because I've seen it from its real depths to the shining star that it is today. And it's not just in terms of its stock price, but every ratio and customer recognition. I think again, the answer may not be that exciting because it fits into everything that Harsh and Manian, laid out in terms of a framework.
Sure.
They laid their governance framework right up front and got that right. And then top of that, they brought in an exceptional leader who really focused on getting the fundamentals of the business right and dug in for the long term and took every issue and, thought about it and invested in making sure that the difficult decisions were taken upfront so that the long term was glorious.
Mr. Mariwala, in building Marico, you have encountered challenges of various hues, and you've discussed it in your book as well in a lot of detail. Tell us a bit about what new leaders need to learn in the current context of disruption, where I remember in one of the earlier conversations, you said that the challenges now are much more. The world is a lot more competitive. The environment is more challenging in several ways. How do young leaders actually brace up and thrive in this environment?
I think corporate leaders have to look at both angles. How do you nullify the threat? And how do you create an opportunity of that disruption is very, very crucial. Now, disruptions, of course, technology is the biggest disruptor. But in addition to that, the geopolitical developments is a big, big disruptor. In today's environment with US elections and whatnot,
Yes.
it's going to be a big, big disruptor. So how do you get that outside in? The leader's role is increasingly to see what's happening in the world, whether it's new technology or whether it's geopolitical developments or supply chain issues. So I think connected with the outside is how do you get the outside into the organization and not look internally, but implications of what is happening outside on your business is going to be a very, very crucial aspect of corporate leaders. Number two, we saw it in COVID that the overall development of, say, vaccines, which used to take 8 to 10 years, happened in 2 years. So agility has played a very, very important role. In a fast-changing world, many times you don't need perfection. If you try to be perfect, you will get delayed long period. Sometimes you take a trade-off. Okay, I'm 90% sure, as long as it is not a safety issue like an airline, I have to take some steps and be agile. And combine that with some degree of risk-taking and experimentation, because failures are a part and parcel of our lives. If you stop taking risk and if you start protecting yourself in terms of ensuring that everything works out to your advantage, you may miss out on an opportunity. It's okay to fail. Out of failures, you'll get many, many learnings. So I would sum it up by saying, get the outside in, be more agility. Of course, COVID has taught us to be far more empathy and all that. And then what I mentioned earlier, that just ensure that the talent and everybody else, it's just not the top leader, but the whole team is looking at it from this angle.
It's interesting that you brought up empathy here. I want to come to you, Mr. Manian. What do you think leaders should do to build more trust in an age of disruption? There is so much of mistrust around artificial intelligence. Will it lead to job losses? How is it going to be used? The entire governance structure around artificial intelligence. Tell us a bit about that. How can leaders build trust in an age of mistrust?
Yeah, I'll start with a small kind of a instance where a lot of our marketing material now is created through AI.
Yes.
Yeah, but we make sure that we always write in every single advertising that promotional material we put down. We write imagined by humans, created by AI just as a philosophy. It's not the law yet in the country, right? But we write that always. I think it is about being transparent, because like Amit said earlier, AI can be used in absolutely non-transparent transparent ways, and it can be used in transparent ways. What we have to make sure is you have to be clear who are your stakeholders when you are leveraging something like an AI. It has humongous potential to enhance your relationship with stakeholders, and it has exactly the opposite also is possible, right? So I think transparency, I would say, is one single thing. Of course, there are many other things that you can do, but transparency, I would say, is one single thing which can help gain that confidence while using technologies like AI. Whether it is with customers, be transparent about the fact that AI is involved in that process. So also with anybody, employees, you can use it with all stakeholders. So if I have to name one thing, transparency.
Would you like to add to that, Mr. Chandra?
All of this does mean much more uncertainty for the organization down to the employee. And so I completely agree with Manian that one needs to be transparent to all stakeholders. But I don't know whether transparency alone makes a individual less anxious. All of us fortunately are at a stage in our career where we can go to bed not worrying about what's going to happen to our jobs. But if you're a youngster graduating and you believe that your job is at risk with AI, I'm pretty sure that it's not easy to sleep at night. So I do feel that we need a better answer for younger folks, which is going to put them at risk, because the fact is, Harsh and his organization do a lot of work in mental health. And when I read the data coming out of some of the work they do and some of the work others do, our statistics on anxiety and depression are going through the roof. And I think technology is contributing to some of it. We don't have an answer for that right now, but I'm sure we don't want a world where everyone's anxious about what's going to happen to their jobs just because we have a great new technology. Technology is supposed to solve problems, not create them.
May I add, Amit, you actually gave a good segue on this earlier when you said that it should be used more for revenue enhancement and cost rather than cost, right? And I think that's where even when you're dealing with employees, I think it's important to use AI at least as much as possible as an aid to the employee, improving his productivity kind of a model rather than a replace the employee kind of a model. I think that's where initial efforts have to be far more on that till there is confidence about how AI will pan out. But over a period of time, I do see, it happened with, let's say, in our industry, in banking, before technology came in, there were a lot of jobs people were doing. And now it's not that banks are employing less people today than earlier, except that the talent mix in organizations will change. So I think it's a transition process. Even the youngsters, they'll realize that newer talents are more employable, and obviously people will move towards acquiring those talents. So I think as long as we handle the transition well, even within each organization, I think this transition needs to be handled well, where initially it should be a productivity enhancer for existing employees rather than replacing existing employees. Over a period of time, as this transition happens, people gain skills which are different from what so I think future organizations will have a skill set mix which will be different from what it is today, like it is today compared to what it was 20 years back in most of our industries. So I think as long as we handle that transition well, it will be.
Let me add one more thing on the trust which he had talked about. I think transparency is absolutely important. But I think transparency by itself is not enough to generate trust. I think you need authenticity. If you believe me, if I tell you something that I promised you to give, say, whatever, some promotion after 1 year, and I'm just giving an example, and then you start doubting because I have given promises like that in the past, there is no authenticity. So authenticity combined with consistency. If I have said something, I will come what may, I will stay by that word. So authenticity, consistency, and transparency, I think they build in trust. And one other, at least when it comes to dealing with outside work, I strongly believe in under-promising and over-delivering, because the moment you over-promise, then under-deliver, people start losing trust. So in capital markets, especially, we always believe that let's under-promise and then try and over-deliver. People will always think that I can trust this company.
So before I wrap the panel, very quickly, in one phrase, tell me, what do you think is the big change that 2025 will denote? Starting with you, Mr. Manian.
So, in my mind, every year is a year of change. I mean, there is no year where it's not a year of change. But I do think that this year is particularly important for the reason you yourself mentioned, that I think we are seeing a slowdown in the GDP. Yeah, I think we need to be decisively turning the tide this year, and this year will matter a lot. Otherwise, you have 2 or 3 consecutive years of declining growth needs to be arrested. I think so. I would say 25 is a year of urgency on that front. I think we need to turn the tide.
Mr. Mariwala?
I would say leveraging disruptions, whether it's geopolitical, technology. I think the key thing, whether it's government or private sector or public sector, how do you leverage disruptions is something which is going to be very, very crucial for this year.
Mr. Chandra?
I would say focus. This is the year where it will be very easy to be distracted because, as both Harsh and Manian pointed out, you're going to have many sideshows. You'll have events, geopolitical events happening all over, which have the potential to impact us, some cases directly, some cases indirectly. And while they have impacted us in the past as well, I think they will potentially happen with much greater frequency, and some of them will happen together, overlapping. And there will be a tendency in all of this to want to react, very quickly. And it's very important to make sure that you don't do something in the short term which harms us in the long term. So this is the year where all of us, whether it's corporate leaders or government leaders, will have to really keep, as they say in cricket parlance, their eye on the ball.
Eye on the ball.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Manian, Mr. Mariwala, Mr. Chandra. Thank you for joining us today evening. Grateful for your insights.
Thank you so much.